Haha, I was still muted. Multiple technical issues there. Just a few minutes late. It's a good hour to stream. Welcome to the Trusty 8 podcast. I've already got Tobin in the back room, I see. I'll just go ahead and bring you in here, Tobin. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. A little bit of a shock to the system today. I had to completely readjust my schedule and fill my coworkers' very large shoes. So that was interesting. It was a job I only until today kind of knew in theory.
Mm.
Yeah, the politics at my workplace are a little different. There's I don't know, there's something extra to it, I guess, compared to other jobs I've had. But it does give me a lot of time to study on topics like this, which is what I try to do while I'm working. Be a little productive, during my downtime.
Right on. Heck yeah. Making best use of time, right?
Well, yeah, because it's easy enough to just space out and play video games for 8 hours or something.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do play video
So
games, but it is kind of like a rarity. Like I'd rather be doing other things.
yeah, I feel the same way. Like I don't want to knock it. Some people are just more into it than others, I guess. But I think it is easy to kind of just get lost in media. Whether it be video games or
Oh yeah.
movies or anything else.
Oh yeah. Dude, I'll waste some good amount of time just sitting there on Facebook and going through and looking at all the memes and stuff. Like, yeah. And before I know it, a whole hour's passed, and I'm like, oh shit, wasn't I supposed to be doing something?
See, with me, it's not so much like just the memes themselves. Can be like, you can get kind of entranced or whatever and scrolling, but it's when I hit one that triggers me in a certain way. And I want to be skeptical, but at the same time, I will just tend to start being very reactionary to certain things. And then I just end up kind of making an ass out of myself and not really making a good point. It's happened more than a couple times.
Hey,
I
but
hope
getting
if
out
my
there and having conversations with people, and it helps build your ball of knowledge. What you know, which is kind of like what you want to talk about tonight, right? How we know things.
yeah, yeah, a little bit. So yeah, the study of philosophy broadly, and then various like types of philosophy. I guess I'm more well versed in certain schools of thought, and so sometimes I get flustered by language I don't understand because the definitions will change to certain aspects of conversation.
Yeah, that is getting definitions. Whenever you may be unsure or whatnot, it's good to get those out of the way. Like terminology and having a good working definition helps understand what is being said. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that you're not like talking past one another and stuff. Um, so I just wanted to kind of present a little, additional study into this. This kind of applies to the review I did, the assessment analysis rather I did of a guest of Canadian Catholics who I reviewed. I don't know if you've seen that video or not uh, on my channel here.
Yes.
And so his argument and his field of knowledge, I guess you would say, is metaphysics, which is something that I've always felt I had a particular bias about. So I was trying to kind of get to the root of that. And in my studies, I don't think I was too far off the mark. I may have misunderstood a couple things, but I just started by going like back to the basics, just define all of these kind of different concepts, generally, and how are they like differentiated from one another. So what I found in my studies, and this is just, a basic Google search, but they basically boil the types of philosophy into two schools, which are either practical philosophy or otherwise something that's useful to people, like in their day-to-day
Pragmatic.
lives, and
Yeah.
pragmatic philosophy, right? And then there's non-practical, or what you might call a theoretical philosophy, something that digs a little deeper into the why question. But apparently, nobody's really answered this, in a way that's well accepted by all of the members of this field. So it's still
Right.
pretty, yeah. Especially in the realm of metaphysics, there's a lot of incongruence between metaphysicians, so that's an issue. And I do believe, there's it's probably a good case to be made that this study of philosophy grew almost explicitly out of monotheistic religion, and that's how it appears to me.
And what was the third topic? There was a third one, right?
Oh yes, Well, I mean, I was trying to kind of put a broad brush on that, and I did misrepresent, I suppose, in the original title. I had to change that, so I had said fundamentalism, and there is some relation there, but that's separate from the idea of what is. Now I'm losing words. Fundamentality in the metaphysical claims, in terms of philosophy, what it means to be fundamental, and these terms are practically defined versus the theoretical definitions presented by metaphysical argument. And so one example of that, that's very popular is like the Darth Dawkins claim. Well, there had to be some fundamental cause. There had to be this one prime thing, as like a prime mover argument, basically, that has to explain everything else. You must have one conscious entity before all the rest. Hello, Kendra. Good to see you there. Saw a cat there. Yes, sketchy marsupials, stupid monkeys, whatever we are, talking about philosophy and such. But so back on topic there, I think, generally this is kind of the foundation for almost any like really well articulated claim for deity. At the root of it, and I don't want to get ahead of myself because I haven't even gotten into my reading yet, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. This particular metaphysical claim is one of, and I'm getting more familiar with this. I had a bit of a misrepresentation of what this really meant, but it's an ontological argument, right? Essentially a cause and effect argument. I'm still working on my knowledge of that, but if any of that sounds right to you.
I'm actually looking up the definition for metaphysics, and I'm familiar with the word ontology, but I cannot recall the definition right offhand.
Yeah, so I was going to pull these up, but that's why I wanted to just read these right off of the bat, before pulling up this lengthy. I found something from Stanford. Stanford, of course. I don't know. I'm going to get bashed for my sources, or who the fuck is this? Okay, I'm getting some really strange text messages right now. I think the devil may be at play.
Uh-oh.
We'll not even go there. I'm gonna get distracted. Okay. So, did you find the definition for metaphysics there?
Yeah, the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space.
Yeah, it's a very, very broad category, and I don't want to, sit here and say, not all metaphysics is the same. Some metaphysical argumentation or some version of metaphysics makes its way into like theoretical physics, right? Like that's the only way you get something like string theory or something like that. It's still a metaphysical claim. There's no empirical evidence for it, so that's what differentiates between the branches. Between what is a science, what is philosophy. It's a very different claim at its base, and then even furthermore, once you have these two distinguished fields of practical versus impractical philosophy, that just adds like a whole extra dimension to the whole dynamic, I guess. So yeah, you got metaphysics basically right there. So I wanted to break down though the other philosophical orientations, which I see as the most commonly accepted ones are basically linguistic philosophy or the philosophy of language. Obviously, meta philosophy, ontology, theology, nosology or nosology, I don't know, which basically is the philosophy of knowledge. So that's something interesting to look into. There's scientific philosophy, and then there's philosophical naturalism. So those are the most widely accepted branches, I suppose. So this is just one of those which incorporates or attempts to incorporate, the others. Um, so when somebody comes with a purely metaphysical argument, right? Like they're referring to studies in just this particular branch, and then try to make claims about the others, I think, without properly accounting for those different definitions and understandings.
My basic understanding of like metaphysics before was just abstract thinking, being able to speculate or using your imagination about things. um and that's the way I always kind of used it. Metaphysics as in, you know imagining something to create it in your head and then be able to take that and then be able to make it into reality. But then you have to use uh different philosophy, because then you start dealing with what's real.
Right. And can we touch it? Does it really matter to us? Like, so one of the this is not the one I wanted to pull up. That's great. One of the very popular arguments here is going to be like that basically, like the atomic structure, like since we ourselves are made up of all these tiny constituent parts, and each of those has to be individually explained, and et cetera, et cetera. So basically, there's this theory called foundation of being, which consists of a series of independent entities, or in other words, they would all be, that's the word I'm looking for, a fundamental, foundational, which would constitute or complete the basis of that which all else depends. Right. So we could not be without our atoms, and essentially that's kind of how they break it down. And then where did the atoms come from? And you have to imply consciousness. Um, so it's very well articulated, but at the same time, it's kind of like a really sophisticated version of, look at them trees. Like, how could everything not exist?
Well, it is what it is. There's, it obviously cannot not exist, because it does. I don't know. Like, the metaphysics stuff really kind of like has always, I've been like, how is this useful? Okay, like, whenever you hear those kind of claims.
Yeah, exactly. It's not useful to you unless you want to prove your God claim. But again, once you prove the God claim, then you can open people up to all kinds of other influence. Yeah, this is not the same one. I don't know why I can't find
But it
the
doesn't.
article I was looking at earlier.
It can't show evidence. Like, if you're using metaphysics, if you're speculating about all of these things, it's all assumptions, and there's no way to show any evidence through that. And it's funny when they think that this is proof, because I can give you this metaphysical argument that is not flawed, but at the end of the day, it's still just an argument. You can't show me nada.
Yeah. Oh, I can out logic you, bro. Yeah, for sure. And it's a tactic that a lot of these guys are using, like Darth and like other people. Not so much the serious academics, but these trolls on the internet will learn a bit of this this style, this mode of logic, and run with it to an absurdity. But in the minds of a lot of people, because of the level of frustration and the way they will essentially control conversations via psychological abuse, and a lot of people who are already, on the fence, or maybe already possess the God belief, you think, well, that guy just owned that atheist, like that. He didn't know he had no idea how to defend himself, when in reality, every reasonable defense one would make, they can simply it kind of circle back in their argument and say, well, you can't explain this either, and somehow you end up looking like the dumb guy. But that's not really what happened. It's just a matter of them being so confident in this form of argumentation.
Yeah. It's a problem, though. It can be a problem. Like, it has real life situations, like people making assumptions, like how confident they know something, and they'll totally look over something very important. I just recently heard this story, and there was a couple that had a call. The police were called to go out to their place because they wanted to get a check on them, because they haven't heard from these people. The cops get there, they knock on the door, and eventually they get the door open. Somebody answers it, and they're dealing with two people, and one of them has an injury to the face, and they find the girl, and there's this girl shot dead. She's on the couch, she's dead, and they automatically assume that this guy shot and killed her. And he was like acting strange, but still being like calm, and like he was, he wasn't trying to run. They take him to jail. They get him. to the interrogation room. There's like 8 hours have passed, and finally the dude who's interrogating him after 2 hours starts looking at his face and goes, "Oh, what's this on your, face?" And notices the bullet wounds. The dude had been shot in the head twice, and they totally overlooked it. And this dude was not making sense when he talked, but they assumed that this dude had just shot the woman, even though he did not say it. It's a messed up story. I'm like, and that's where, like, uh, making assumptions, you know, jumping to a conclusion quickly can really do harm.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say there's also an element to that, at least on this particular topic, where um, people operating in circles where they are they don't operate. I guess the best way I could put it is they don't operate out of healthy skepticism. They have been at some point thoroughly convinced of a concept, and then they become basically embroiled in these circles of people who are trying to solidify and validate that concept, and it's like an echo chamber, right? And then they come into contact with people who disagree with them, and they're literally not listening. They're not hearing the other party's argument, because their only focus is to discharge their own um, particular brand of knowledge, right? Like they don't have any interest in actually hearing what their interlocutor is saying. Like,
Mm.
so I think that's an important thing to note. I mean, specifically about, like, I don't want to keep beating it over the head here, but a lot of metaphysics, and even some of the classical philosophy, I think, contains these kind of predispositions from people. Mind you, logic evolved faster than science for some reason. So, that's why you have all these weird claims coming around, because, if logic leads us to it, and it must be true. And I can't think of one in particular, but, that's why it's like religion was really the first science, because at the time they didn't really have any arbiter of knowledge. So, I don't know. It's strange the way that worked out. So the God claim came, or devil claim even, was the common explanatory or explanation for, like, disease and mental health disorders and things like that, right? It must be demons, or we must have done something to piss off God, because my sisters got sick with mumps or whatever, like. And they just didn't know what was causing this, and so they made it up. They just made it up, and like a lot of this philosophy, a lot of these arguments still rest on that foundation, which is really weird, because they believe that their foundation is rooted in reality, but they don't apparently don't believe that their eyes and their minds can be deceived.
Mm.
This is the second one I wanted to share here, but it's regarding kind of what we're talking about here, metaphysical grounding. I guess we'll just go through this article. Well, I'll put the notes I have on this is like essentially this is these are unchanging or completely stable entities, right? They're fundamental entities that make up all constituent parts, right? So they have to believe in something that was never born, will never die, et cetera, as a presupposition to this argument. In the article here, it says, consider the following claim: the truck drivers are engaged in a labor strike in virtue of picketing. What sort of claim is this? It seems clear what sort of claim it isn't. It isn't an identity claim. For example, the property of striking isn't identical to the property of picketing, as there are different ways of striking. such as carefully following all safety regulations so as to impede productivity. It isn't a causal claim either, at least if by causation we mean what we normally mean when we use the term. The causes of the strike concern not the picketing of the truckers, but instead antecedent events, such as how their employer has allotted payroll deductions and benefits. Finally, the claim isn't purely modal in character either. It isn't merely the claim that there is a necessary connection between picketing and striking. Perhaps this behavior, together with the satisfaction of other conditions, suffices for there to be a labor strike, but the former suffices for any number of things, such as the fact that 2 plus 2 equals 4. So what sort of claim is it then? Some suggest that this and similar claims are grounding claims, where grounding is understood to be a form of constitutive as opposed to causal or probabilistic determination or explanation. The point of departure for theorizing about grounding is that there are a variety of claims. Claims we make in ordinary life as well as ones we make in the context of doing philosophy, that are best interpreted as being claims about what grounds what. As for metaphysics in particular, some claim that grounding plays a central role in the enterprise properly conceived. Jonathan Schaeffer, I believe, for example, writes that metaphysics, as I understand it, is about what grounds what, rather than what exists. And according to Fine, questions about what grounds what are central to what he calls realist metaphysics, which concerns not just the nature of things, but whether they are real. Indeed, Fine writes, if considerations of ground were abolished, then very little of the subject would remain. And I'm not going to go through all of this paper right now. I hope eventually I'll find the one I was looking for initially, but I read through several of these and a few others today. Right. So let's just get to the crux of what was just said there at the end. What is the nature of grounding? Why I think there's grounding in the first place, and how does grounding interact with other notions of philosophical interest, such as necessity? It's going to be important in fundamentality. If it's fundamental, then it is necessary. Schaeffer's comment, metaphysics is about what grounds what, right? So in this worldview or this mindset, right, it is illogical for human beings, conscious human beings, to exist if there was not a fundamental conscious entity that came to begin the whole process. There's simply, that's incoherent to them. How do you think we might change someone's mind who thinks that way?
Really, there's some of that I did not quite catch. But we're talking about grounding things, right?
Right. It has to have some semblance of logic that you can. In other words, you wouldn't have to know all these fancy words. You know what I mean? Like it would be intuitive to you.
I really try to make my philosophy as easy as possible. Like, my definitions to words have just 2 to 4 words. I don't have lengthy definitions on things. I like to have as little moving parts as possible. But that's just me. That's just how I think.
No, I totally agree there. It is hard to pierce the intellectual veil of certain people. Maybe it's just not worth trying. Maybe it's a waste of time. I don't know. But I do feel like there's got to be some. If I'm skeptical enough to say that I'm relatively agnostic to a certain extent, right? Then why is there this? Why is it pushed always to extremism? I guess like it seems like an irrational use of rationality. Um, oh, and I wanted to. I missed a couple points in my note here about the other fields of practical philosophy, which would be very important, which are things like ethics, aesthetics, politics, and logic. Right, these are all practical things, and these are the areas where somebody with uh, meta. Oh my gosh, why can't I say
Metaphysics?
metaphysical. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to say three different things at the same time. Metaphysical argument are interfering into these types of these other adjacent philosophies, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just the claim that I know there's God, I know there's only one God. That's the base claim. But then, who is that God? What does He command? And well, you could take a wild guess who we're talking about. Um, yeah, man. So I don't know. I lost my primary resource, which kind of sucks right now that I cannot find the particular thing I've been looking for, and I don't want to ramble on much about it. But I think these are all like really interesting fields of study. It's sometimes frustrating, but it's more frustrating like going into a conversation and just not having any real like having to go in and get the definitions as you're in there. Like, so that's kind of one of the points of why I wanted to do this.
Increase your knowledge of the terminology so you can be able to respond to these people who are giving really fancy definitions for things.
Yeah, yeah. I
My
mean,
understanding.
yeah, in some way being able to steel man your opponent a little
Yeah.
bit, you have to be able to do that to make a really cogent argument against them, I guess. And also because I've been kind of trying to redefine my own philosophies and find out where they really stand, because it seems sometimes I align with schools of thought that on the surface level I might feel like I agree with, but once you dig deeper into it, um, you know, there's a lot of doubt. And I don't know whether there's a better way to have conversations like that. A perfect example is by starting a conversation with an apologist by saying you're agnostic rather than atheist. They just seem to uh, be less aggressive, less prone to try and pigeonhole you.
So being able to kind of get my words straight. Being able to have good conversations is there's it's definitely a good thing, in my opinion. A goal to have is to have good conversations to where they don't get heated. I don't know if this is the direction you're really talking about. I don't know. I'm kind of starting to ramble right now.
No, you're good, man. I mean, I as I said, I kind of lost some of my direction when I lost the article I really wanted to read, and I'm not gonna sit here and freak out over it. It's been quite a long day as it was, but
Yeah.
Like I said, I read several of these just to take down, like, essentially just a few of these notes. They kind of relate back to, again, this central argument in various forms. And so, like, in my mind, the argument that Dr. Sijuwade, I think that's how his name's pronounced, the guy that was on Canadian Catholics channel, nice enough person, very reasonable, but his argument is essentially the same as Darth Dawkins, right? He's just using a different whatever you'd say. He's wording it differently, and he's reasoning it a bit differently, but it boils down to essentially the same claim. And if you ask them if they can provide evidence, they just say, look at them trees. Where did your atoms come from? Well, you can't tell me either, therefore you lose. And so that's why it's really dishonest. I don't know of any other really serious school of philosophy that would ever acknowledge an argument like that. It's purely in metaphysics and theology.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we should have called this one practical versus, impractical philosophy or whatever. I was just spitballing, it was a brainstorm. I see it as like, for me, it was like just a sequence of triggers in my mind that kind of made me say, well, maybe they need to look at more of this. So,
Well, what does philosophy mean to you?
yeah, see, so I always interpreted philosophy, and to be fair, as a young person, like, I always said, like, philosophy is bullshit. Any type of intellectual is, egalitarian philosophy is bullshit, right? That's the way I saw it. But in reality, each form of philosophy is an explanation to rationalize why things are the way that they are. And this is like unique to each individual in my mind. I don't see any one as being like supreme over the other. So it's why are things the way they are, and then B, how can I make the best to adapt to the situation and make it livable for myself, right? Like, so I don't know, like my favorite I guess philosophical thinkers have been like the classical Stoics and stuff, um, but really I'm a bigger fan of Nietzsche, but I don't think that's like a way of life. I think it's just a unique perspective on the world that is interesting and provides some insight. But I think Nietzsche was an absurdist to some extent. He was kind of a comedian as well as a philosopher, and you have to interpret his work as such. Otherwise, you get some really weird input.
Yeah. From what I've learned about him, which I don't know a whole bunch, yeah, he wrote a lot. Like, he's got a bunch of books, and some of them like correspond with each other. And I haven't actually ever read through a full entire book of Nietzsche's. I have gone through it. I'm pretty sure I've read paragraphs and stuff of it, but I've never taken a deep dive.
If you're gonna go through one in text, I would definitely recommend Beyond Good and Evil. That was a game changer for me in terms of just the way I viewed the world. But again, take certain parts of that in the context of the time period, and that he is satirizing to a particular audience at that point. Like, it has a kind of different historical relevance. So yeah, Beyond Good and Evil, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Those are great. I mean, I think all of this stuff's great. I haven't read all of it through and through, but I've heard enough, like, commentary and quotes of different things. So uh, worthwhile. But I mean, like, as far as like practical philosophy, like Stoic living. Like Marcus Aurelius has a lot of just tremendous insight into the way our minds work, and it's yeah, I think it's an indispensable work in changing one's way of thinking. If you really want to condition your mind to be rational above all else, then read Meditations. Meditations is also a fairly easy read, I would say, for anyone. It's not extremely technical. Like most of the concepts are laid out really plainly. Um, yeah, I know a little of Voltaire, and I'm not familiar with Defoe. Um, Diogenes is one of my favorites, though, out of the Greek pantheon. But these new philosophers, um, they engage a little bit differently now. Like they've updated and modernized certain terminologies to suit um, their arguments as they are today. But it further complicates things because I don't know, once you get more technical and you start applying definitions differently in different fields, it's easy confuse to confuse your opponents or people who are listening who aren't well versed in it. And so one example was the video we did. They call it the science of natural law, right? Um, there's a number of implications in calling natural law science, and and then it's not there. Natural law is actually another point of philosophy. Maybe we'll touch on later, but I feel like I'm just kind of rambling now. But if anybody wants to contend against anything I've said, that's kind of also the point. I had to go back to work and stuff, but I am trying to enter like debate circles. So like even just having a conversation like this is enriching because we can bounce these ideas back and forth and just get more familiar with speaking the language.
Right on. Heck yeah. Yeah. That's part of the journey, is gaining knowledge that is useful so you can
Yep.
make wise decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most important part of the journey is gaining knowledge. In as much as we all want to share the useful things we feel we have acquired, um, there's a right and a wrong way to do that, and then there's also the fact that as useful as something might be to you, it may not apply to another person, or you may just generally be wrong and not know that you're wrong. But being able to speak the same language in particular situations just makes it easier, I guess. And I feel it helps. It helps to like that what I was talking about earlier. That very just that immediate reaction, that response is not how you want to participate in conversations, even if you feel you're like on the correct end of the conversation, because you can be right and still engage the wrong way. So yeah, I guess just
Yeah.
that's all I was
No,
trying to say.
I'm not. I I try not to do the ad hominem attacks or name calling somebody. You know, like that. Really, I mean, like it's very hard to tell like what state of mind another person is on the other end of that message. If you send those kind of messages that are you know ca- could quite possibly actually make the person like feel really like horrible about themselves, like um I don't know, words can have an effect on people, but And also I don't think it actually helps out the argument. The argument no longer becomes about the issue that's important. It becomes about something as frivolous as somebody's personality type, or the clothes they're wearing, or however they act or whatever, which is you know really not all that important in the end of the day. It's just ugly. It's disrespectful, really.
Yeah, yeah. Any type of ad hom or personal character attacks is really useless. I think I even heard Jefferson Spatchcock say, like, somebody had, I may be wrong, but I think it was Jeff, that somebody had accused their interlocutor of being drunk, and Jeff said that would that actually be would that make his argument any less sound? Like, if his argument is reasonable, does it matter whether he's drunk, right? Like, that's his
Yeah,
business. And so it was just kind of like one of those, like, oh yeah, yeah, that's really not even an attack against. It's not even a valid attack, and that's not even really a personal attack. It's an attack on one's state of mind, which
yeah,
again, like, you can't claim without, if their argument's not, even if their argument is irrational, if they are not acting irrationally, then you still have to at least entertain the argument. I mean, if you're going to be involved in it, you know what I mean? So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with that, but not being reactionary to them. So because then you definitionally become the irrational person. So yeah, I don't know. That's something.
yeah. You
But
can be drunk and still reason correctly, and then use critical thinking. You could slur and be all kinds of stupid looking, and then say something intelligent. That is possible.
yeah, yeah, it's probably less likely, but yeah, it's definitely possible. Um, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But again, this does not apply to all metaphysics. It's going to be like, metaphysics sucks. There are different arguments in that realm that still may have some practical application,
Yeah,
or at the very least um, are useful to people in the ways of like thought exercises and things like that. So
yeah, dude.
yeah,
Metaphysics is a good concept. I mean, like, to me, it's just basically thinking about abstract things, being imaginative inside of your mind, and like being like, it goes into all kinds of arts and things like that, being able to sit back and think of the abstract, and like put things together in your mind to create something new, is uh a useful tool. I mean, music, and I mean a lot of other things, it really do depend on that type of thinking, being able to think like that. But whenever you start trying to twist it up into uh, reality, and use it as like something that is going to make it to where somebody is, um, using it as proof for something, that's just nah.
yeah, and I
It
think
doesn't fly with me. I don't know. Maybe I don't have it right. I don't know.
that exactly, that's exactly where I'm coming, like the circle that I'm coming back to, I guess, on this topic is that metaphysical argument, however you frame it, may have some validity, but at the end of the day, there's no, I don't think, any um, metaphysical claim of this kind that can be demonstrated. Like, until you have the demonstration of this fundamental entity, you cannot claim it. You can claim it in theory, but you cannot claim it and say that X is proof, whether X be the Bible or the rings in the trees or something. Kat, I just want to respond to that real quick. Okay, I did Robinson Crusoe. I am familiar, but I'm just not as familiar with the author apparently. So there's something more to look into. Yeah. So I guess it's kind of a useless question to ask a metaphysician, whether they can demonstrate or provide evidence for their fundamental. But it's also the most important question, because if you can get one of them to admit that they cannot, then you're having a different conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. I think a lot of those guys are more intelligent than that, and they'll try to find a way to weasel their way out of it.
Yeah, some people are just trying their best to just not be wrong. They just don't want to look wrong in front of everybody. And if they can convince themselves of it, and that's enough for them, I don't know. I don't know. I can't really live my life that way or think that way. Like that's
I know it seems like insanity from this side, doesn't it? Like looking in.
It does. It does.
No, I'm wrong all the time. I've probably been wrong 9 times out of 10 on this stream. So yep. I guess we'll give it a wrap up. I'm gonna try and keep these going throughout the week, and tomorrow will be something completely different. I want to talk about like sexuality and gender and why I think I might be queer. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not even sure anymore. I don't know what you call this. So I don't know. We'll try to figure it out together. If anybody else wants to stop by, you're of course invited as well, Tobin.
Right on.
Do you have any shills or closing remarks or anything you want to say to the stream here as we wrap up?
Hey, what's up, Geo Sam? And Kat, thanks for hanging out with us, and thank you for inviting me to hang out with you.
Yeah, this is intended to be a study, although I was not as put together as I would have liked to have been for this. So, but I think we got a lot of good dialogue. We still maybe learned a couple things between us, and found some more points to talk about later. So I don't know. I'm just trying new things, I guess.
We got some books to check out too. At least for some of these books, Dinogene. I don't think I've heard that name yet. So
Diogenes. Diogenes. Yeah. I don't think Diogenes has any writing proper. He's written about by essentially by other philosophers, but Diogenes, if I remember correctly, he lived essentially as a stray animal. He frequently refused to wear clothes. He ate scraps of food that people left behind and was essentially just a beggar, but that was his philosophy. And there's a pretty sophisticated argumentation behind it, that basically, I'm just fine to live as a dog. And I don't think I got that totally wrong.
That's interesting. No, I'm going to have to definitely, that'll be something I'll be looking into.
Yeah, it's a great story. All right. So, yes, we will wrap up here, I suppose, on the topic of what philosophy, metaphysics, I can say it again, fundamentality, and grounding. We talked about those things and more, and some other stuff that came up in the side. And I want to thank everybody in the chat as well, Geo Sam, Kat, Kendra, of course, Tobin. Thank you for coming on along this journey with me. And we'll bid you a good evening or good night or good morning, maybe wherever you are, whenever you are. We'll see you next time.